Welcome to San Antonio's Influence Magazine show, the premier talk show where we introduce you to influential individuals doing significant work in the city of San Antonio and surrounding areas. Celebrate the spirit of business, leadership, and innovation. If this is your first time joining us and you'd like more information, you could find us at influencesa.com. That's influencesa.com. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and for this particular episode of the show, all future and past episodes of the show, pull up your YouTube search bar, toss in San Antonio's Influence Magazine show. When you get there, please subscribe, give us a like or a thumbs up, and hit that bell so that you don't miss any future episodes of the show. Welcome to the show, folks. I'm Cedric Fisher. Today we're sitting down with a leader whose career has shaped business community and global opportunity here in San Antonio and far beyond. Chris Herring is a retired Air Force officer, former chamber president, global business strategist, and nationally recognized advocate for minority business enterprises. His story is archived at the Library of Congress and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. A true testament to a life committed to service, integrity, and impact. In this conversation, we'll explore the values, experiences, and defining moments that have guided his journey from military leadership to global commerce. Get ready for insight, wisdom, and a powerful look at what it means to lead with purpose. We'll be right back.
We are always trying to fix something, but we must start with forgiving. We must begin to open our hearts and follow God. We also must learn to forget, because if you don't forget, then you haven't forgiven.
Presented by Cedric D. Fisher and Company Publishers. What if the path to healing your deepest wounds began with a single, powerful choice? To forgive. In the Blessings of Forgiveness, Blaise Labbe takes us on an extraordinary journey from the struggles of a childhood marked by colorism, racism, and family secrets, to finding hope, redemption, and the courage to heal. Blaise's story is one of resilience, of rising above the pain of a fractured family and systemic prejudice. His journey takes him from a small Louisiana neighborhood to the heights of success as a journalist and leader. But it's the lessons learned along the way that define him. Blaise discovered that forgiveness was not just a gift to others, but a pathway to his own freedom. This memoir is a message of hope for anyone seeking healing from their own struggles. Blaise's reflections on race, faith, and the enduring power of love remind us all that the hardest roads often lead to the most beautiful destinations. The Blessings of Forgiveness by Blaise Labbe. Available now wherever books are sold.
Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you a quick story. When I first moved here and relocated here in 2011, being a media professional, publishing professional, I came to town, and one of the very first things, I realized I didn't know anyone, so I said, let me identify the leaders in the market. I think at the time you were chairman, CEO of the Alamo City Chamber of Commerce, something of that sort. So I knew who you were, reached out to you several times. You were busy, so and you didn't know who I was, didn't know me from Adam, but I was already a fan of yours before we even met a good 5 to 6 years later. So glad to have you sitting down with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I remember back in those days, we had a very, very busy business economy. I think at that time I had just also published Riverwalk magazine. I was doing that in San Antonio, and I was blessed with being able to be hired by the Alamo City Black Chamber. And that chamber is really special because it was founded by a black woman named Euretta Fairchild. And she happened to be the executive director for the YWCA on the east side of San Antonio. And so as I learned the history of Miss Fairchild, she enabled 12 men to use the YWCA to form the Alamo City Black Chamber, which happens to be the oldest chamber of commerce formed by a black woman in America. And so the Alamo City Black Chamber is not the oldest black chamber. It's the third or fourth oldest in the state of Texas, but the distinction of having a woman to lead it from the very beginning. So I look at it as almost like Euretta, Fairchild, and the disciples, because she enabled them to be able to then talk about San Antonio and the business that happens in San Antonio. During those times, of course, the market was segregated. It was different. And as we look now, at 2026, we have gone back to, as a city, a race-neutral type of city, which doesn't hold well right now for black-owned businesses. But we'll talk more about that. But yes, I do remember when we first had that great introduction. We've been great friends ever since. And I've been also studying your work, and I just know that whatever you do, you put the signature and stamp of excellence on it. And that kind of goes back to my background in the Air Force. We had a core principle of excellence in all we do. And that's what you've shown me since I've been here in San Antonio.
Appreciate that, Chris. So let's start with your background. Just let our audience know where you're from. Talk to us a little bit, maybe about your childhood and then your education.
Oh, sure. So I grew up in upstate New York, in a town called New Windsor, which is right next to Newburgh, New York. Now, Newburgh, New York, my parents relocated from Garland, North Carolina, which is my other home. Even though I never was born and raised there, I call that my home because we still have our 40 acres, a mule. We have plantation land that was passed along to my great grandfather, who passed it on to my grandfather and so forth. And my dad gave me a piece of the rock, so to speak. And so North Carolina is a home for me, but upstate New York is also a home. And I found in upstate New York, Newburgh was the welfare capital of New York State. So it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. And my brothers, who I grew up with, are about 10 years older than me. So I just turned 57. So 10 years older, and they were a generation apart. But I saw that during this time of integration in this community, it was very difficult for my family. And so I watched my dad, who's still alive, he's 92. He's a retired pastor, but he really signified the excellence of service, and kind of, showed the way for his family. So, it's been good. My mother worked retail, and she became an entrepreneur before she passed, selling hats, church hats and so forth. So we all had a little skill set that we all mastered, but very grateful, that I have great parents as role models. And even with my dad in North Carolina, he remarried, but his wife is an entrepreneur herself, a pastor. So it seems like God keeps reinforcing the excellent type of leaders that we have, that I'm able just to be surrounded by.
Very nice.
Yeah.
How about your education?
Yeah, I went to Boston University after high school.
Boston University.
From Newburgh Free Academy.
Okay.
And at Boston, I picked, of all schools, a place that was really, 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 really tough if you were an African American or black person. My parents wondered why I wanted to go to a very different Boston. And back in those days, there was a number of stories that hit, national headlines about how there was racial friction And
What year was this that you enrolled?
so I went to Boston University in 1987.
87.
Yeah, the beginning of hip hop.
Okay.
And so I could just remember going there, and we had KRS-One, Public Enemy. I mean, these were kind of the people who I listened to, going into a very different environment. I happened to experience the worst of the worst treatment. I was met on my very first day with a police officer who said, "Hey, you don't belong here. Go back to Roxbury," which is a smaller black community there. And I remember we call them, and they had the helicopter police that put the lights on my roommate and I as we were walking to Kenmore Square. And they said that we were suspects in an armed robbery. I've heard that more times in my life, believe it or not. And today, proudly, my roommate is a state representative, Russell Holmes, and has been serving that community for at least 16 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud of him. We learned very quickly that there's so many different obstacles that can be put in front of us. But for me, the military became my next path after Boston University. So I received my commission at BU, and that's the same school that Dr. King went to seminary. Most people don't know that, but I was on the grounds of where Dr. King learned ministry at a very young age. But we moved from Boston, and I went on to active duty. And I just happened to be selected by the Chief Staff of the Air Force to be a minority recruiting officer. So he threw me into being one of the Air Force's first minority recruiting officers, with the challenge of find those who are qualified, bring them into the Air Force, and let's see what we can do. So that was kind of my start. And that was, again, in the early 90s.
Interesting. So your career spans military service, chamber leadership, entrepreneurship, and global business. What core value has remained constant through these various vocations?
Yeah, it's service. I mean, service is the watchword that I've always believed in. Service came out, in the Air Force. Service came out in every nonprofit organization that I've touched. Service is a part of what we do, and it's more of the attitude of how can I help someone and not look for something in return. And I think that's kind of why I'm not the billionaire. I don't I've never self-served, and but I've been in positions where I could have self-served, and I've been in positions where I could have taken advantage of opportunities. Some may call me foolish, but I just know that God had what he had for me without having to, take and take and take. And I think that as I look at what leadership really is, I would encourage any person who has a heart for service to be prayerful about maintaining that service with character, because people really have trusted me over the years, and I'll talk more about relationships later, but I think it's the epitome of what I've learned now, is that your service and relationships are so very, very, very fragile. And I'm grateful. Again, we go way back, and it's because we've maintained friendship, but we've also served together to where we can look at each other today and say, hey, let's do this interview.
So you've always been purpose-driven versus profit-driven, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that my opportunity at Boston University, when I was learning about Dr. King and seeing the fact that we were in a place where I could learn so much about a great servant leader, it really was the essence of who I became. Back in those days, look, we had 13 cable channels, and there were very few, shows, if any, that had black people, African American people. And the very few times in which we did get to see someone that looked like us, it was during Black History Month, or it was during maybe something that had to do with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. So he was probably the greatest influence that I saw on TV, who gave great speeches and who moved people. And so, yeah, so services, I think, was ingrained in me at that age. Yeah.
During your time at leading the Alamo City Chamber and later the Texas Association of African American Chambers of Commerce, what do you feel was the most transformative moment for minority-owned businesses in Texas?
During that time, I think the most transformative moment was really realizing that we had to work together. All groups had to figure out how to work together. I think that when I was leading and can recall, we have probably 20 some odd different chambers of commerce in San Antonio. And each chamber represents a niche. An Asian niche, an African American niche, a Hispanic niche, a woman's niche, a veteran's niche.
Then we have the North and
the South.
And the Greater or the
At
South.
the time, right, we had the North, the South,
right,
the West. And we never had an East Side chamber, except the Alamo City Black Chamber was known to be the chamber for the East Side. And so the footprint and the geography all really defined our position in the marketplace. And for me, knowing that I was also representing the city of San Antonio mayor on the Small Business Advocacy Committee, that I had to think about how I would represent my chamber, which was a race-based chamber, and then also that of the mayor, who was an African American, but I would have to tell the story of the African American business experience through my participation on the Small Business Advocacy Committee. So learning how to work together was probably one of the hardest things, because you would see different groups have their own advocacy that definitely served their group, but didn't serve us all. And those arguments, those debates, those things never have gone away. In fact, I think that we were so splintered, which really led to the demise of the small minority business programs in which we've had in San Antonio. I was successful in working with the Fair Contracting Coalition and learning under Mr. T.C. Calvert and others about how to bring a community together. And so we did have a success with mobilizing, organizing, and then bringing together the chambers of commerce to create a 5-year contracting diversity plan or ordinance of the city. And that ordinance helped to provide resources, training, and contracts for businesses that otherwise would not be afforded to work with the city of San Antonio.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're here with Chris Herring. We'll be right back.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Okay, here we go, throw it! Yeah.
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Nice.
What were your lessons learned at the state level of Texas?
Our state is very complicated. It's a business giant when you think about all the departments, all the leadership that extends from the governor's office throughout the state. He is the executive director for the state of Texas, so to speak. And when I left the Alamo City Black Chamber, I was elected by the chambers across Texas to be the chair. And as I led with Charles O'Neill, who's the president, and the board, it was very interesting to see that our goal was to make sure that public dollars were being recycled back into our communities across the state. And you could kind of see that through the way that the state spends its money and who it contracts with. And that back in those days, we had a Texas Hub program, which is right now in the courts through a lawsuit, but it was a minority-driven, historically underutilized business program that has gone away in 2025, pulled by the comptroller without going through the legislation to serve the overall minority population and group that had businesses. And so it was interesting because we were getting less than 1% of the state spend, and yet we represent, as African Americans, as blacks, we represent between 13 to 15% of the state population. So to have less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
That was the argument that I was having with the governor. And he said, be grateful. Well, today, the be grateful that was said back in 2018, 19, is we have no representation. We have no contracts that are being worked by the departments. And the goodwill that the governor expressed that they were going to do their best ended up being a false promise.
Never follow through on.
Well, the follow through is the fact that the program has been abolished. It's
gone.
Yeah, the promise is that they gave us a pat on the back and said, hey, you can fend for yourself. The promise is that the disparity study that the state of Texas used to hold onto on its website was basically removed, and there's still disparity in the state of Texas. So as long as we know that these are the facts, the way and manner of the comptroller was inappropriate, but no one has checked him from the governor's office to any level of the legislation.
Chris, your stories are archived at the Library of Congress and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. What part of your journey do you hope future generations can learn from?
Well, I was honored to be honored, and I would imagine that my service, whether it was military service, whether it's service within chambers of commerce work, whether it's even today, just trying to be the best servant leader that you can be. That's probably, all that I would probably want people to kind of think about. Advocacy has a price, and I've been an advocate for the majority of my life outside of the Air Force. When Julian Castro appointed me to be the chair, I was actually appointed to be on the committee, the mayor's representative on the Small Business Advocacy, and then later emerged to be the chairman when we were recognized with the best small business program in the nation. That came over a 10-year journey. 10 years. So, and it was an unpaid volunteer position, working with the city staff. And as I realized, like in most cities that I've gone to, city staff members who focus on economic development typically have never been in business themselves. And that's where the rubber meets the road.
Interesting.
They're talking about the book theory, supply and demand and what should happen in the market. But if you ask them, have they ever cut a payroll check? Then you're going to get a deer in the headlight look. And this is the lesson that I would think that people who are trying to figure out, well, why doesn't my city understand all the things that it takes for me to push and run my business? It's the practical question of, do they have experience doing what you do? Do they have experience forming a business and seeing a business actually, be successful, employing people, delivering a product or service? These are the tangibles that business owners sweat over all the time. That is probably not appreciated as much by those who have been hired to do a staff job.
Okay. As a retired Air Force officer, how did your military experience shape your leadership style in business and civic leadership?
Greatly. As I opened up with you, I told you I came from a poverty city. And as I looked at, coming out of a poverty city, and I'm living in a city which has great population, but we are also a poverty city.
Yeah.
So I ran for mayor.
We lead the country, right?
We're at the top of the country with poverty.
Yeah, how does that happen, Chris? I'm just curious. How does 2 million people, metro, 7th largest in the country, we've got a sports franchise, major sports franchise. How do we continue to not be able to build an income base for the poor?
So I'm going to be fair. I'm going to say this. I don't think that any leader has been driven in this city to not want to see the best for all of the citizens. What I would say is like we lacked technology in the past that would enable us to understand and see the stories underneath the stories. Meaning none of us are statisticians, economists, and so every leader that has come into the position of mayor has inherited a city manager. That manager has governed how we do business, not the mayor. It's the city manager and the staff. So over time, just like in all of America, we like to build what's shiny and new, and then we kind of leave behind what's older. And it's really, and when we're looking at poverty, it's the communities that are poorer, that are older, that weren't built correctly from the beginning, that have been left behind because it's easier to build something new somewhere else. And so we call that growth. But poverty, unfortunately, doesn't move because most people in their lifetimes don't move around. So the same families that have inherited poverty will continue to live in poverty conditions and transfer it to the next generation. I'm working on a project right now with the National Data System, an initiative I created, which is to study cities by zip code. And if you study a city by the zip code and learn the DNA of the zip code, you can actually build a solution set to fix poverty or any other problem which the city may have.
So geographically, San Antonio's sort of the poverty is divided by zip codes, or it's in certain zip codes and just not in others.
Right.
So it's not really spread out across the city.
No, and
you'll find it in pockets.
Right, and you can look at things like the census. And back in the day, I didn't know what a census really was. I just knew that they would come knock on your door, ask how many people live here, they would take a count. But that information is the foundation of how you can actually track a generational lineage to what the conditions were then and what they are now. I took a personal interest in my own family, trying to understand, where does this Herring name come from? Who's who within my DNA. And I learned that not only does the census have my grandfathers and their occupations, and then it had their wage. So I was able to learn who was wealthy in the neighborhood and who wasn't. So if you take a look at zip codes today, you can find that same type of lineage, because again, people don't really move around that much. And I think that kind of goes into the heart of where our city is today. We have a Ready to Work program that really wants to give the best educations to individuals so that they can be the future providers of the city. However, in our poverty zones, we see more people coming out with occupational certifications: plumbers, electricians, estheticians, cosmetology experts, laser tech, things that are under the Texas Department of TDLR, that actually churns out these folks, but we never take into account the effort, the work that they provide to the economy of San Antonio. We never incentivize them to be able to further themselves into being master electricians or master plumbers. That's where we really need to go with this city, because we are more of a blue collar type of city than we are a city that's built around the tech stuff in which everyone wants to make a claim to.
Yeah. Okay. You often speak about integrity, community, and global thinking. How do you personally define leadership with impact in today's environment?
So after I graduated from the Texas Association for African American Chambers as a chair, there was no place for me to go within our niche. And I was hired by the Global Chamber to be the executive director for San Antonio. I didn't believe at that time that I was qualified, capable to be able to do anything with international business, because I really felt that you needed to have a business degree with a framework of international, and you would be able to understand it. So, I applied and I was hired. I've been with Global Chamber since 2017. And with that, I've grown to understand that the foundation of business isn't necessarily the geography of international or US or whatever. It's really the foundation of building relationships. And so through our founder, CEO, Doug Brunke, who's masterful at understanding the importance of building relationships, he says we can take away the boundaries, we can take away what geography lanes that divide us, and we can create a global mindset that works with each other. So we have over 600 metropolitan markets from around the world that we meet on Zoom. We have various types of meetings, and we get to understand and learn more about the respective geographies that we want to do business in. So as a person who's representing Texas, I bring my Texas members into conversations with London, with Spain, with Africa, and we have deep relationships with people. And I find that it's probably one of the stories of America that's probably not been told, because we typically judge international market behavior by certain indexes that most people don't even know anything about. But on a basic level, the Global Chamber specializes into helping to form relationships and to keep those relationships going into productive business.
Few final questions. In the next 5 years, what initiative are you working on now that you're really passionate about that 5 years from now should be built?
Well, I want to say this. 5 years from now, I think that I don't think that we're going to be able to understand or recognize where we are as a country. And I think the acceleration of AI, the acceleration of people who are really grasping on to what technology looks like, they're moving at rapid speed, so fast that it's going to impact how we see national defense. It's going to impact how we see basic consumerism. It's going to impact us on every level. I've built actually a geospatial intelligence system. God granted me the ability to do so. It's like building, I think I would compare it to like Noah building the ark. Noah built an ark, but he had never seen rain. I built a system that I didn't know that it was already being done elsewhere. And once I figured out what I actually built, I was like, wow. And so, again, I think God grants us the desires of our heart. So when I said that I wanted to end generational poverty in the city of San Antonio when I ran for mayor, I really meant that. And I've been working with my wife to figure out what does, poverty look like, and what are strategies, solutions. So that's my study right now for the next 5 years, God willing. Even though I battle cancer, He's given me the strength to be able to say, hey, wake up, figure out can you help a business? How can you help a couple? How can you help government officials? So I've been meeting with government officials, mayors, and saying, hey, do you know you have a problem? What kind of problem do I have, Chris? You have a problem with childcare. Well, what do you mean? How do you see childcare? Well, I mean, it's good for, the families to be able to have a place to bring their children. No. Childcare is infrastructure. You've just inherited through gentrification of San Antonio a population of people that now is making your economy bust at the seams, and your families that are here don't have a place because you never thought about building childcare. You built homes, but you never built the infrastructure for families. So that's the work I do now. And so then I'll help that mayor, that city council figure out who are the franchisors that can come in, build a childcare center so we don't have childcare deserts, and keep these economies moving. So I'm troubleshooting now on seeing the various things in which most people can't see. And I'm publishing them through, if I may, through TexasCapitalReport.com. And I'm putting those trends, those analyses, those intelligence reports all online so people can see how we've made decisions, and perhaps they're wrong, but perhaps they're right.
Very good. I'll be following you for sure.
Hey.
Sounds like a great initiative. Think about this question. For the folks that know you, what's the one thing that they don't know about you but should?
Well,
and it could be anything. You're
so
fitness, you're a vegan,
so I think everything in life at this point for me is very, very personal, right? Because when you go through stage 4 cancer, doctors tell you, hey, I'm sorry, you have a different perspective. So I would first of all say that my faith is very, very, very important. So you can talk a lot of yin yang, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna say, hey, you praying about it? And how does what you're saying really line up with the Word of God? So, I go back to the Word of God for everything, because God is not surprised about anything. He's not surprised by any leader. He's not surprised by any situation. He's seen it all. So I just go back to the source. That's probably what most people would say that they didn't know about me.
So you're a man of faith.
Yeah, I've lived a worldly life as well. I've been, and I say, out loud, I said I was probably one of the worst sinners ever, right? Just because I was making not mistakes, I was sinning, and I made things in life uncomfortable for some people. But reconciliation is the biggest ministry that we all have. How do you reconcile with someone who you don't like? How do you reconcile with someone who you've hurt? And you know it. You have to own it. So you have to take accountability. You have to go back. You have to apologize. You have to do the things in which, most people will never do. But that's why I'm sitting here. Because again, back in 2020, they said it's over at that point. And this is 6 years later. 6 years later.
So there was still work for you on this side.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. So I tell my testimony to say that God can use you if you're willing to be used, and if you're transparent, and if you're willing to do the work. If you're not, then you die, you perish. But if you're true to who you are and you develop that character, then I think that God can use you until He wants to take you home. So, hey, I think that's probably what most people don't know about me is I'm very prayerful about all things. Even though I may stumble, even though I may sin, I just come back to a forgiving God and know that He's communicating with me through and through.
Speaking of the Word of God, all leaders are readers, Chris. We know this.
Yep.
Typically, their favorite book is on their nightstand. What book's on your nightstand?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'll say this: the Bible is certainly one. I have a library like you, where there's really not a favorite book, but many books. So I dive into anything and everything from, old Encyclopedia Britannicas that I have, to, maybe leadership books that most people probably would never pick up. And maybe about the stolen legacy. I think I was reading Men of the Stolen Legacy, which was basically kind of resurfaces what we're going through today, whereas you see history being thrown away and new history being replacing old history. That fascinates me because, again, it's nothing new. And so you have to kind of understand the history of why people do what they do in order to understand how you can either be guarded and how you can be also educate your family to what's right, as opposed to everyone just listening to what's wrong. So I try to take ownership of my own peace, stay in my lane, read a lot of books that have to deal with serving. And really one of my passions right now is to see how do we get nonprofits to work together. And so I do have within my national intelligence system a methodology to pair nonprofit organizations on common missions. So when mayors say, hey, we have this problem, a mayor should be able to do one query, find all the organizations that have the same IRS approved mission in their location, and come back and say, sit down at the table, let's figure out this problem, and let those leaders earn their keep.
Very interesting.
That's where we need to go to. And that's targeted intelligence that solves problems. That's why I want it to be mayor. But I can still do it informally by just helping to steer the right organizations to each other, encourage partnering, and see where we can take it.
A servant spirit.
All the time. Try to.
Chris Harry, thank you for coming on the show.
Man, thank you for having
sharing
me.
your story with
Appreciate
us.
you, Cedric.
We'll see you all next time.